it to people is that when you think about something that's fragile, you think about something that is breakable, right? A vase. If you put a vase in a box and you send it over to Europe, you put a bunch of stickers on it that say fragile, 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 as they say in the old Christmas story. Because if it breaks, it's worthless, right? If it gets thrown around, it becomes worthless. What I usually ask people, right, in this context is not the same, but I'd ask people, what is the opposite of fragile? And what we would often say is tough, resilient, robust, right? And what Taleb makes the argument is that that's not the opposite of fragile. That's actually the middle ground, right? The middle ground is like you put a piece of metal, and if you throw it around, it more or less it stays in the same, maybe a piece of steel or something or rather. But something that's anti-fragile is something that is the opposite of fragile. It's something that gets better with disorder. It gets better with time, maybe. Like your immune system, our immune system, the goal is to always get better and fine wine, right? The longer it sticks around, the better it gets. The reason I think that's important is that because in my experience as a player, coaches often created fragile systems of play. They created, and in creating a system of play or a defense that was fragile, they created players that were fragile. They created players that if the defense didn't work in the specific way that they were taught, they didn't have an answer, right? I never wanted to play that way offensively, right? The offensive way would be we run a play, it doesn't work. What do? We look at the bench, and then the coach has to call another play. That's a fragile offense, right? The defense is the same way. My goal as a coach was to have an answer for everything. I wanted my players to believe that they had an answer for everything on offense, that they had an answer for everything on defense, and better yet, that they could create problems for the defense, for their opponents that they didn't have answers for, right? So again, that might seem philosophical, but the thing I like to say to people, young and old coaches, you do have a philosophy. It's just a question of do you have it written down and do you know what it is? That is just one simple reality I return to all in all. So the goal was always to have an anti-fragile offense, to have an anti-fragile defense, a team that would feel great in the chaos, that would feel fine in the disorder, and better yet, a defense that the more I exposed it to, every team that we played throughout the season, we just kept getting better, right? Better and better and better. Every coach, we talk about wanting our teams to peak in March, but then we often create systems of play that make us worse in March, right? Or February, depending on the level you're at. That once the team figures you out, maybe you play them for the second time in league play. Are you harder to play the second or third time, or easier to play the second or third time? If you only play the ball screen one way, or you only play this zone, and that you see it enough and you figure out the puzzle, do you become easier to play? We want to be more dangerous. We always said we want to be the most dangerous team in March. We might not be the best team, but we want to be the most dangerous team. That's all a part of the philosophy. All right. Second thing is, I always want to be on offense. It's an aggressive way of thinking, right? I had a high school coach. My brother and I played together for a couple years in high school, a couple years here at Penn State. And we had a high school coach. We averaged over 85 points a game in 32 minutes of play throughout high school. We had multiple high school games. And what I learned from him is that the aggressor wins the game, right? The aggressive team wins the game. The aggressive game plan wins the game. Sure, sometimes you're going to lose, but 9 times out of 10, teams that lose because they're on their heels, right? They lose not because they're fighting on their toes, but because they're on their heels. So good defense, in my mind, puts players in an offensive frame of mind. It's a dictating. It's not a passiveness. In such a way that every stop equals an opportunity. We all agree with that, right? As coaches, that yeah, we get a stop, and now we always say after a stop we're playing downhill, not uphill. But what I would define and what we would say to our players is that not just every stop equals an opportunity, not just a miss and a clean rebound, but every good make equals an opportunity. When you define to your players what a good make is for you, both offensively and defensively, a good make from the other team can be fuel for your own team, right? So if you define that For example, a mid-range two with a hand in the face, everyone agrees that's a good make for a defense. Congratulations for the offense. The defense should get fuel. They should feel like a win. There were different ways I did that, and we'll watch some films so I can explain some things. But in general, good makes your team should know what a hey, we gave up a basket, but it was good. We're on offense here. We dictated what they got, and they got what we wanted, not what they wanted, right? That's the frame of mind that you want. And the second thing is that defense fuels swagger, not fear. And a lot of times I've said to people through the years, just philosophically, like basketball is a very unique, free-flowing, emotional kind of game. You can play it well with emotion, and you want to create a certain kind of swagger and confidence that when you have a team that believes that they have an answer for anything that the offense does, or better yet, that the offense doesn't have an answer for what they're going to do, you have a team that's confident. You have a team that's full of swagger, not fear, right? They're the ones on their toes. They're fighting in the center of the ring. They're throwing punches. They're not just putting their arms up and receiving punches. To me, defense starts with that kind of offensive mindset. And ideally, it fits with your offense, right? If you want to play this way that I'm probably describing, and I'll show you some examples of pressure and different ways of disruption, and then you want to play slow and call every play, then okay, it might not be the perfect fit because defense and offense in basketball are in the same universe, right? They don't exist on just separate worlds, which is what we often treat them as that. There's an interconnectedness to this game of basketball that's beautiful and that's fun and that's messy and that we can't always get our hands on, but when players learn to own it, magic really takes place. So the four things I return to over and over again, just on a personal level, is that the defense, we want to disrupt you, we want to deceive you, we want to dictate what you do, and then we want to run. Um, there are ways to do this and not to run or play a fast tempo game, but I tend to think that the way, if you want to play defense in this way, you're often going to end up with better, quicker opportunities on the other end. I think you can make a case for different kinds of defenses, right? This is what we'll get to in this time. Different kinds of defenses. You can play zone, you can play man, you can play different kinds of zone. You can switch it up between various things. One of my favorites is just the question, is this a zone or is this a man? And you're not really sure, and they're not really sure. To me, defense is about disrupting the rhythm of the offense, their offense, and fueling your own offense. That was my goal. If you ask me why do we play defense, we defend to disrupt you and fuel us. That was our goal. It wasn't to stop you, it was to disrupt you and to make you play in a way that you didn't feel good about, that you didn't feel comfortable about, right? It was offensive minded. And secondly, we wanted to deceive you. We wanted you to make you ask questions to say, well, is it this or is it that? Well, it was this, but now it's that, right? Something that's fragile is something that's super predictable. Something that's anti-fragile is often unpredictable. So we'd say many a time that I wanted to create an unpredictable and unkind game, right? People will talk about kind environments versus unkind environments. We wanted to create an unkind environment to players and coaches, right? And secondly, third, we wanted to dictate, right? Dictate what you do, how you do it. And, there's many, many things I can get into, and we'll have a couple examples of how we did this against certain teams. But one of the simplest ways I approach this from a scouting perspective that I would encourage you to ask, and if you're taking notes, write this down, is when you're watching film or you're watching an opponent, don't ask yourself, what do I see? Ask yourself, what don't I see? So, we use synergy at our level and even the D3 level, and I would watch countless clips. And I was always asking myself, okay, it's particularly like we can just click and find out how do teams score, right? If you're in huddle or whatever, you just ask yourself, click on their scores and just watch how they score over and over and over again. And what we'll typically do is just respond to that to say, how are we going to stop that from happening? Right? That to me is a passive question. I think the better question is, what isn't happening? How can we make that happen? Because if we make that happen, the chances are they're not going to be very good at it, right? Does this